4 astronauts are falling toward Earth at 25,000 miles per hour right now, and for 4 full minutes, no one can reach them. Today is April 10th, 2026. Right now, as you watch this, 4 human beings are hurtling through space inside a capsule roughly the size of a large SUV. They have traveled farther from Earth than any human being in 54 years. They flew past the dark side of the moon. They broke a record that stood since Apollo 13, and in just a few hours, all of that, every sacrifice, every year of engineering, every delay, every argument about whether this mission was even safe enough to fly will come down to 4 minutes of absolute silence, not 4 minutes of tension. 4 minutes where mission control goes completely dark. No signal, no telemetry, no voice, just a clock ticking on a screen nobody wants to look at, and 4 people sealed inside a capsule being swallowed by plasma hotter than the surface of the sun. This is the story of those 4 minutes, and why the entire future of human spaceflight depends on what happens inside them. Commander Reid Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, mission specialists Christina Koch and Jeremy Hansen. These are not names from a movie. These are 4 real people who, on April 1st, 2026, strapped into the Orion spacecraft named Integrity, sat on top of the most powerful operational rocket NASA has ever built, and lit the fuse. Christina Koch has already spent 328 consecutive days in orbit, the longest single spaceflight by a woman in history. Victor Glover flew combat missions before living aboard the International Space Station. Reid Wiseman spent years landing fighter jets on aircraft carrier decks at night, essentially parking a car doing 250 kilometers per hour onto a moving platform the size of a tennis court, in the dark, over open ocean. And Jeremy Hansen, a former CF-18 fighter pilot, is the first Canadian to travel beyond low Earth orbit. Here's what makes their return different from every other astronaut who has come home before them. A capsule returning from the International Space Station re-enters Earth's atmosphere at roughly 28,000 kilometers per hour. That is fast, but we have done it hundreds of times. The physics is understood. The heat loads are mapped. The Artemis II crew is coming home from the moon. Orion will hit the upper atmosphere at over 40,000 kilometers per hour. Mach 32 times the speed of sound. No human being has ever survived re-entry at that speed, because until now, no human being had attempted it since Apollo 17 in December 1972. But here's the part that nobody in the general public is talking about. The heat shield on this capsule, it already failed once. When Orion hits the upper atmosphere, the air molecules in front of the capsule cannot get out of the way fast enough. They compress into a shock wave. They superheat. They ionize into plasma, a wall of superheated gas wrapping around the capsule, glowing white-orange, reaching temperatures above 2,760 degrees Celsius. For reference, structural steel melts at 1,370 degrees. Titanium fails around 1,670. The carbon fiber and titanium skeleton of the crew module would be liquid in under a second without protection. That protection is called Avcoat, an ablative heat shield engineered to literally destroy itself on purpose. As the plasma attacks, the outermost layer chars. That char absorbs enormous amounts of thermal energy, then erodes away into the slipstream, carrying the heat with it. Layer by layer, the shield burns so the crew does not. NASA used Avcoat on every Apollo capsule that came home from the moon between 1968 and 1972. It worked flawlessly every single time. So when engineers designed Orion's heat shield, they went back to what they knew. They should have been less confident. In November 2022, the uncrewed Artemis I flew a 25-day journey around the moon and back. By nearly every measure, a triumph. The celebration lasted until engineers retrieved the capsule and peeled back the heat shield for inspection. Over 100 locations showed unexpected damage. Large sections of charred Avcoat had cracked and broken away in irregular chunks. Not the controlled, even ablation that decades of ground testing had predicted. Jagged, unpredictable material loss that had, in some areas, exposed layers that were never supposed to directly face re-entry temperatures. The culprit? A maneuver called skip re-entry. Artemis I had dipped into the upper atmosphere, used aerodynamic lift to bounce back above it like a flat stone skipping off water, then plunged back down for a final descent. During that bounce phase, heating dropped sharply. The char layer became denser, less porous. but the Avcoat underneath was still warm enough to keep producing gas through a process called pyrolysis, essentially burning without oxygen. That gas had nowhere to escape, pressure built inside the blocks, and when the capsule hit the atmosphere for the second pass, those pressurized pockets ruptured, blowing chunks of shield into the slipstream. Over 100 damage sites, on a capsule carrying no crew. Lockheed Martin removed approximately 200 Avcoat samples for analysis. NASA ran more than 100 tests trying to replicate and understand the failure. The investigation took over a year, and the conclusion? They did not replace the heat shield for Artemis II. Wait, they knew the shield was damaged, and they put 4 people behind it anyway? Here is exactly why, and why even the critics who objected eventually got back in the room. NASA's answer was not to rebuild. It was to change the problem. The skip re-entry, the maneuver that caused the gas pressure to build and rupture, was eliminated entirely. For Artemis II, Orion will fly a steeper, more direct descent. No bounce phase. No moment where trapped gases can accumulate and fracture the shield from within. One continuous plunge from entry interface to splashdown. The trade-off is real. Higher G-forces, greater structural loads, more intense peak heating for a shorter duration. But engineers calculated that a shield that sheds material unpredictably is far more dangerous than a shield that burns harder and faster in a straight line. Lockheed Martin's systems director Blaine Brown publicly stated the density of the Avcoat material was slightly modified to allow gases to escape during high heating and cooling cycles. NASA's Office of Inspector General reviewed the plan in January 2026, called it technically feasible but complex, and flagged that it remained contingent on successful testing. Some engineers continued to object. They argued NASA did not fully understand the failure mechanism and should not fly until a new shield was designed. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman, who personally flew to orbit aboard a SpaceX Dragon and understands spaceflight risk from inside a pressure suit, not behind a desk, reviewed every piece of data and accepted the plan to fly as is. All 4 crew members reviewed the Artemis I damage photographs. They studied the modified descent profile. They understood the risk numbers. And they got in the capsule anyway. On April 10th, around 7:53 p.m. Eastern Time, Orion reaches what engineers call entry interface, 122,000 meters above Earth's surface. The European-built service module, which has provided power, propulsion, water, and breathable air for the entire 10-day mission, separates and burns up in the atmosphere behind them. Everything disposable is jettisoned. One by one, every component of the 30-story rocket that carried 4 people off Earth has been discarded, until all that remains is a single capsule falling alone. The guidance computer takes over, making micro-adjustments using reaction control thrusters. Within 90 seconds of entry interface, the exterior temperature crosses 2,000 degrees Celsius. Plasma closes around the capsule like a fist, and then, exactly as physics promised, the radio dies. At hypersonic speeds, the plasma sheath absorbs and reflects radio waves across virtually every usable frequency band. No signal gets in, no signal gets out. Flight Director Rick Henling and his entire team in Houston, the men and women who have trained for years for this exact moment, will sit at their consoles staring at blank screens and wait. For the crew inside, sealed and falling, there is nothing to do but trust the engineering and watch the windows glow. This is the 4 minutes. This is what Apollo 13 felt like in April 1970, when an oxygen tank explosion crippled the service module and nobody knew if the heat shield had been compromised. The expected radio blackout was 3 minutes. It stretched past 4, then 5, then 6. The room in Houston sat in total silence watching a clock. When Charlie Duke finally heard Jack Swiggert's voice cut through the static, grown men broke down. This is what Columbia felt like in February 2003. Except that time, the signal never came back. Foam insulation had struck the thermal protection tiles on the wing's leading edge during launch. Nobody caught it in time. The crew never received a warning. 7 people died during re-entry. Heat shield failure is not a theoretical risk. It has a body count. In a few hours, we find out. Either the signal comes back, or it doesn't, and everything built for the next 30 years of human spaceflight either continues or stops. After peak heating, assuming the shield holds, Orion will still be falling fast. At roughly 7,600 meters altitude, 2 drogue parachutes deploy. Then 3 pilot chutes pull out 3 enormous main canopies, slowing the capsule from 480 kilometers per hour down to approximately 27 kilometers per hour. Splashdown is planned in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego, California, where the USS John P. Murtha, already positioned and waiting, will recover the crew. If it works, Artemis II will have proven the one thing the entire future of American lunar exploration depends on. Not just that Orion can fly to the moon. Artemis I proved that. What Artemis II must demonstrate is that Orion can bring people home from deep space, that the heat shield can protect a human crew under the most extreme thermal environment any crewed vehicle has ever faced, that the modified descent profiles solve the gas pressure problem that no one fully predicted. Artemis III, the mission that will actually land astronauts on the lunar surface for the first time since 1972, cannot be cleared to fly until Artemis II proves the ride home is survivable. Artemis IV, the first crewed lunar landing targeted for 2028, waits behind that. And beyond that, Mars. Every trajectory home from Mars requires re-entry at velocities that make tonight look mild. It all starts with this capsule, and these 4 minutes and this shield. 54 years ago, we stopped going to the moon. We had the rockets, we had the technology, we had people willing to fly, but we stopped, and for more than half a century, the farthest humans ventured was a few hundred kilometers above Earth's surface, circling close enough to see city lights at night. Artemis II is the first step back, 4 people flying a vehicle that has never carried a crew, around a destination humanity abandoned 2 generations ago, protected by a shield that didn't behave the way it was supposed to last time. Everything that comes after, every lunar landing, every long-duration surface stay, every piece of infrastructure we build beyond Earth, depends on what happens in the next few hours. If that signal comes back, the moon becomes a destination again. If it doesn't, everything stops. The crew of Artemis II has already made history. They flew farther from Earth than any human being in 54 years. They saw the entire globe from pole to pole. Commander Wiseman watched a crater on the far side of the moon, named after his late wife by his crewmates, and couldn't find the words. Now they just have to get home. We will know soon. If this mission matters to you, share it, subscribe, and when splashdown happens tonight, we will be back with the full breakdown of what the heat shield data actually shows.